Here is a question that has been troubling serious thinkers for more than a century. Pan-Africanism, the idea that the peoples of Africa and the African diaspora share common interests, common heritage, and a common destiny, has never fully succeeded. No United States of Africa, no single African currency, no passport that moves freely across every border on the continent. Every major push toward continental unity has been met with obstacles it could not fully overcome. And yet, the idea keeps returning. In different forms, in different decades, through different leaders and different movements, Pan-Africanism refuses to die. So the question this episode asks is not what Pan-Africanism is. It is something more interesting. Why does an idea that has never fully won keep being reborn? What need does it meet that is so deep, so persistent, so human, that no amount of political failure can permanently extinguish it? To understand why Pan-Africanism keeps returning, you first need to understand what it actually is. Beneath the politics, beneath the conferences and the congresses and the declarations, at its philosophical core, Pan-Africanism is a response to a wound. The colonial project did not just take land and resources, it fragmented, deliberately, systematically. With extraordinary efficiency, it divided African peoples from each other. It drew borders through the middle of ethnic communities. It separated the continent from its diaspora. It created 54 nations where there had been thousands of interconnected communities, and insisted that those nations, with their colonial languages and colonial borders, were the natural unit of African identity. Pan-Africanism says that fragmentation was not natural. It was imposed, and the impulse to heal it, to recognize what connects African peoples across those artificial borders, is not nostalgia or naivety. It is one of the most rational political and philosophical responses to colonialism ever articulated. As long as the wound exists, the impulse to heal it will return. That is why Pan-Africanism keeps being reborn, not because it succeeded, but because the need it meets has never gone away. Pan-Africanism has never been a single idea. It has been a family of ideas, connected by a common wound and a common aspiration, but expressing itself differently depending on who is speaking and from where. W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the movement's intellectual architects, approached Pan-Africanism as a question of political solidarity. African and diaspora peoples, he argued, needed to organize together at the international level, to speak with a collective voice in forums where the world's future was being decided. His weapon was the intellect. His arena was the Congress, the Declaration, the published argument. Marcus Garvey approached it differently. For Garvey, who built one of the largest mass movements in African American history, Pan-Africanism was about economic self-determination and physical return. A black nation, a black economy, a black steamship line to carry the diaspora home. His weapon was mass mobilization. His arena was the street, the meeting hall, the ship. Kwame Nkrumah, who led Ghana to independence in 1957 and spent his presidency pushing for a United States of Africa, approached it as a matter of urgent geopolitical necessity. A fragmented Africa would always be vulnerable to external exploitation. Only a united Africa could truly be free. His weapon was state power. His arena was the continent itself. 3 different expressions, 3 different strategies, the same philosophical wound, the same philosophical longing. We should be honest about why Pan-Africanism has not yet succeeded. Because the obstacles are real, and some of them were deliberately constructed. The Cold War turned Africa into a battleground between 2 superpowers who had no interest in a united, independent Africa. Leaders who pushed too hard for genuine continental sovereignty, Patrice Lumumba in the Congo and Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, were removed. By coup, by assassination, with the direct or indirect involvement of external powers. The economic architecture of the post-colonial world was built to keep African nations dependent, individually and separately, on Western financial institutions. Debt, structural adjustment, trade arrangements that favored the extraction of raw materials over the development of African industry. These structures worked against continental unity because unity would give Africa the negotiating power to change them. And within Africa itself, the pull of the nation, of the ethnic group, of the immediate over the long term, has repeatedly fractured movements that began with continental ambition. This is not a failure of African people. It is a predictable result of systems specifically designed to produce exactly this outcome. The miracle is not that Pan-Africanism has not yet succeeded. The miracle is that it has survived everything that has been thrown at it. In episode 1 of this series, we explored Ubuntu, the idea that a person is a person through other people. In episode 3, we explored Sankofa, the wisdom of going back to retrieve what was left behind. In episode 5, we asked what it means to be African, and argued that identity is not a fixed point but a living relationship. Pan-Africanism is what happens when those philosophical ideas are applied at scale. Ubuntu at the level of the continent, the recognition that Africa's flourishing and the diaspora's flourishing are not in competition, they are the same thing. Sankofa at the level of history, going back to retrieve the pre-colonial connections that colonialism deliberately severed, not to live in the past, but to carry something forward. This is why Pan-Africanism is not merely a political project. It is the political expression of a philosophical tradition that runs through every episode this channel has ever made. The idea that what connects African peoples is older, deeper, and more enduring than what was done to divide them. The idea that it does not die because it is not merely an argument. It is an experience, a recognition, the feeling familiar to anyone in the diaspora of encountering another African in a foreign country and something wordless passing between you. This is Pan-Africanism. Before politics, before the conferences, in the body, in the recognition. Pan-Africanism today does not look like it did in 1900 or 1963. It looks like the African Continental Free Trade Area, signed in 2018, operational in 2021, creating one of the largest free trade zones on Earth by number of participating countries. Imperfect, incomplete, but real. It looks like the push for an African passport, for a continent where Africans can move across borders with the same freedom that the border's original architects enjoyed. It looks like Afrobeats, a musical form born in Nigeria that has become the sound of a global African identity, connecting Lagos to London, to Accra, to Atlanta, to Johannesburg, in ways that no political declaration has ever achieved. And it looks like this channel, and the millions of conversations happening right now, on social media, in universities, in diaspora community centers, in comment sections, between Africans who have never met, in countries they have never traded, who recognize something in each other that colonialism spent centuries trying to erase. Pan-Africanism did not die. It just found new forms. Here is the philosophical argument this episode has been building toward. An idea that keeps being reborn, despite failure, despite suppression, despite the full weight of geopolitical opposition, is not a failed idea. It is a necessary one. Pan-Africanism has not yet built the United States of Africa. It has not yet produced the single currency, the passport, the fully integrated continental economy. But it has done something arguably more important. It has kept alive, across more than a century, the understanding that the fragmentation of Africa was not natural, it was imposed, and that the connections between African peoples across all those artificial borders and all those ocean crossings are real. That understanding is the foundation everything else will eventually be built on. The dream has not failed. it has not yet been given the conditions to fully succeed. It is still being dreamed, and dreamers, in the end, reshape the world. This is Africa Unframed. This is Africa on its own terms. In the comments, do you consider yourself Pan-African? And what would a successful Pan-Africanism actually look like to you, practically in your lifetime? Tell me, these conversations are the point. Next episode, Ubuntu in the age of artificial intelligence. Does Africa's oldest philosophy have something to teach the world's newest technology? Subscribe so you don't miss it.